Good. Everybody's jumped on public on that. They're always making everyone's public on there. I got my drive. Still out, they just more. Oh. Oh, good.
Oh, okay.
I only tried to check.
Oh, 33.
33?
Oh, yeah. Here. We might have to do. Not for my house. Oh, yeah.
Oh, look what this one they got. What? You went to one meeting. Yeah. Oh. So. We're doing lots of stuff. You might make it.
I got your report. I want to see it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So we're gonna have.
Yeah, that's why we're bypassing the meeting, just to meet the deadline, yeah. Pretty straightforward. We don't find it, we won't spend it, we just had to put him down. Just a $20 project, but yeah, we're not going to spend it. So, yeah, we have money.
I wanted all of it.
Yeah, it's like the company we never see out, yeah, because we're not nearly a fraction of this.
Yeah.
company.
Talking about that for property, I want to follow up before anyway, but.
Yeah. So, great trip, it was really good, yeah. Excellent, it was one of the best ones. Atlanta next year.
Oh, it's man.
Atlanta. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's 2025 Chicago. I got my date here.
Yeah, cool, good.
San Diego. I was like 2 weeks when, yeah.
Be engineering.
So the first week of vacation.
Yes.
But.
Yes, that's what we talked about, then, so we got forum and the design changes that we feel to choose, Friday.
Yeah.
Sorry, send it out. I think we can. That's where
Yeah, so we, yeah, so we did that. The existing.
That's what Jenny is going. Yeah, have to do it faster, I totally.
Yeah.
I now have to go.
Don't ever lose that.
No, no.
Yeah, go.
No,
I'll figure it out.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I gotta.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, nobody.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes. Oh, sure. Great. Well,
Okay,
Okay, all right, I've used that all. Okay, I'll give it.
we're going to start. We do have quorum, so I do want to introduce myself. I'm Philip Brown and I'm Office of the Mayor, and want to introduce the council. To my immediate right and to your left is the Deputy Mayor, Alana Yankov. To her right is Councillor John McAleer, Councillor Julie McCabe, Councillor Justin Mattart, and from the councillor from Ward 5, Councillor Ramsey. To my left, to your right, to my extreme left is Councillor Tweel, Councillor Trevor McKinnon, and Councillor Beck. We are missing oh no, Jason, is Councillor Duran on the line?
Yes, I am, Your Worship.
Are you there, Councillor Duran?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Just see if you can get him on the line there.
I am here, sir.
Okay, so you can hear us there, Councillor Duran?
Perfect. Thank you.
Good, good. Okay, and I appreciate that you are out here tonight for a public meeting, and it's a public consultation. So I'll call the meeting to order. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest on this item? None? Okay. If you look at the agenda, the approval of the agenda, Lot 4B, Lot 39 Oak Drive. Emily, that has been, Laurel, Donna, that has been that's been postponed. So we're dealing with one item, 4A, 247, 251, Mount Edward Road, PID numbers 390625 and 390633. I need someone to move the agenda. Moved by Councillor Ramsey, seconded by Deputy Mayor Yankoff. All in favor, just raise your hand, please. Councillor Duran, no problem.
In favor?
Okay. So we are doing a live stream of this meeting. So anyone that is watching or listening to a live stream, the meeting will be archived on the YouTube channel, City of Charlottetown. So if you don't manage to watch it tonight or you want to review it, please just visit www.charlottetown.ca/video. So moving on, I'm going to call on Deputy Mayor Yankov to briefly go over the order of events and also introduce our speaker. Deputy?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks all you folks for being here this evening. As you would probably already know, the procedures here, there'll be a brief presentation by staff and also followed by the applicant. After the presentation, then you folks will have an opportunity to speak. Each of you can have up to 5 minutes to provide comments or to ask questions to either the applicant or the planning staff. Then we'll also turn it over to anyone that's on WebEx this evening. And I'll remind us councillors that we are allowed to ask questions of clarity, but just to remember not to give any opinions on the project as we're to remain neutral until the process is completed. And just a reminder about respect, I think we all know that, just show respect to the folks that are asking questions. We might all have varying opinions, but they're all important to hear. And just a reminder as well that any written submissions must be received on or before midnight, or is that 12 noon? 12 noon tomorrow? Thursday, September 7th. Is it not normally Friday?
No, because we have to prepare the report
Oh,
to go out in the package on Friday.
okay. All right. Thank you. And with that, I will turn it back over. I guess you've already gone through the agenda. So I guess we can turn this over to our planner 3, Laurel Thompson, to present to us 247, 251 Mount Edward Road. Over to you. Thank you.
So good evening, Your Worship, members of council, ladies and gentlemen of the public. This is a request to approve a development concept plan and to amend Appendix A, a future land use map of the City of Charlottetown official plan from low-density residential to comprehensive planning area. Amend Appendix B, comprehensive development area CDA parcels and permitted uses of the Charlottetown zoning and development bylaw to permit a 2-phase mixed-use residential development consisting of Phase 1, 16 stacked townhouse dwellings, which would be 32 units, and 3 apartment dwellings, 42 units, on a 5.25 acre parcel of land. And Phase 2 would be 3 apartment dwellings, 175 units, and 2 stacked townhouses consisting of 4 units on a 2.7 acre parcel of land. It's also to amend Appendix G of the zoning map of the Charlottetown zoning and development bylaw from R2S low density residential single zone to CDA comprehensive development area zone for a portion of PID numbers 390625 and 390633. And the portions of the PIDs that we were talking about are right here, and they're shaded in light beige. The application is also to consolidate 247 to 251 Mount Edward Road to form one parcel. So this is the subject property that's bound by the black line, and these 2 parcels of land would be consolidated into one. So next slide. This is a slide showing the future land use map. So the parcel in question is here. Zone comprehensive development area, and we are designated comprehensive development area, and this portion up here would be the portion where the land use designation would change under the official plan map. Again, as well, the zoning map, as I showed you before, the subject property is here, and this just shows a greater area of what of the surrounding neighborhood. This is just a aerial view of the property. Showing the subject property in blue, and to the north would be the BuildGo property that we just approved a development concept plan on, and then to the south would be APM. So property details, the total property is approximately an 8.1 acre site with frontage of approximately 144 feet along Mount Edward Road. And that 8.1 acre site would also include parkland and roads. So if you were to total the other areas I noted earlier, they would be a little less than that, and the reason why is because 8.1 acres includes the road parcels and the parkland parcels. It's bound to the north by CDA zone land owned by Buildco, as I said earlier, with approved development of 438 residential units and a single detached dwelling owned by the applicant, which is just about there. To the east by Mount Edward Road, to the south by the future Spencer Drive extension, and additional CDA zone land for townhouse and multi-use residential development, which is owned by APM. To the west by the Confederation Trail, and you can see the trail just runs along here, and APM's land is down here. The Spencer Drive extension would be approximately in this area. The request is to approve the development concept plan to develop land for the two-phase multi-unit residential. And under section 44 of the comprehensive development area CDA zone of the zoning and development bylaw, this is required to go through this process. So the legislative requirements would be in accordance with section 3.10, amendments to the bylaw and rezoning and the zoning and development bylaw. And on August 14th, City Council approved the request to proceed to public consultation. On August 24th, there were a written notification was sent to property owners within 100 meters of the subject property. And in total, 28 letters were sent to residents advising them of this public meeting, and it requested the written comments. So to date, no written responses were received on the application. If there's any questions I can answer, I can do that, but I also will turn the presentation over to Robert Haggis, who is the architect representing the developer, which is Flourish Developments. And maybe you would prefer to hold any questions until both Robert and I are finished
No, Robert,
presentations.
you want to present, please?
Thanks, Laurel. Again, my name is Robert Haggis. I'm the principal architect of Sable Arc Studios, here on behalf of the applicant and owner of the property and proposed development, the Flourish Group. First, I'd like to thank everybody for attending tonight and hearing on the presentation and providing your feedback or any questions you might have on the proposal. I believe a number of you would have been part of or present to the public meeting last month that Rob LeBlanc put on for Buildco's development directly to the north. There's a number of like-kind aspects to this development, but there's a number of different things that have been incorporated that differentiates it from that. They obviously are directly connected to by a proposed north-south road connector. So I believe everybody's familiar with the location of the property, but it's sandwiched between Mount Edward Road and the Confederation Trail, directly behind Canadian Tire, the Royalty Crossing Mall. It's prime property for a high-density residential development, walking distance within a number of retail, commercial establishments, schools, the Confederation Trail itself, public transportation as well. So in terms of the phasing, this is just kind of a diagram to explain. Laurel kind of went over it already, but it's approximately an 8-acre parcel. Phase 1 includes the 16 stacked townhouses for a total of 32 units, 3 apartment buildings, which are 2 12 and an 18 unit apartment building. Phase 2, with the north-south road connector included, it would allow for 3 large multi-unit apartment buildings totaling 175 units. The suggestion is for a 4, 5, and 6-story apartment on that west end abutting the Confederation Trail. So again, just to zoom in, phase 1, you can see the stacked townhouses we're suggesting along Mount Edward Road and the temporary road access. It's a cluster of 5 townhouses made up of 5 to 3. The The one abutting Mount Edward Road would exist only as 3 stacked townhouses to allow for that temporary road access for development of phase 1. Here we have the 2 12-unit apartments and the 18-unit apartment. Phase 2, as just mentioned, once the north-south road connector is in and Spencer Drive extension is completed, it'll allow for these 3 larger multi-unit buildings to be constructed, along with the public park along the Confederation Trail that would be deeded over to the city. With that development being an infrastructure in place, we can remove the temporary road access to Mount Edward Road and complete our 3 to 5 stacked townhouses along Mount Edward Road. Again, a bit of a repeat, but you can kind of see in plan in 2D here, the front parcel abutting Mount Edward Road would be a single parcel. These are intended at least stacked townhouses with a single bedroom garden suites, subterranean garden suites, and with a 2-story townhouse on top of that. The temporary road access would allow direct connection to our 12-unit apartment buildings intended in phase 1. Of course, our north-south road connector, we worked directly with Buildco and the designers, Rob LeBlanc and Fathom, to align the roads, of course, but also some thoughtful planning into how the public green space would interconnect. Again, the 4-story 34-unit, 5-story 64-unit running along Spencer Road extension, and then finally a 6-story 77-unit, a total of 145 underground parking stalls. It equates to about 80% of the parking requirements based on the present 1-to-1 ratio required by the city. By doing so, it's kind of given us more opportunity for green space. Of course, it's approximately 1 acre that would be deeded over to the city for the public green space. But it's given us opportunity for more additional green space adjacent to all the buildings. Approximately 35% over the total parcel would be green. This green strip here represents a 20-foot strip. The developers have agreed to grant that to the city as well to allow their future potential plans of expanding the Spencer Road extension from 2 lanes to 4 lanes for possible growth in the next 10, 20 years. Scott Adams is here and Mark McDonald as well, who can share a bit more on that if you need. There is a storm retention pond plan for the northwest corner. That's just an obvious requirement with the development. Simple diagram to explain. I recall from last month's meeting a question with Buildco's development and how the roads would connect to make the total development work. This is showing our north-south connector going through Buildco's, eventually connecting to St. Martha's Court. This is diagrammatic in nature. I'm not 100% sure how it will connect. There's a tree hedge line here, and we just kind of extended it through, likely would come in contact with it perpendicular. But again, that's between the developers and the city planning department. I guess one other thing to just kind of point out is let's see, that interconnected green space there along Confederation Trail. So Buildco's development, proposed development touches on to the proposed north-south road connectors. Ours, the same, connects directly to Spencer Drive for public access. Of course, you can get to it off the Confederation Trail. This is an idea, which I think a good one, because we both need stormwater retention ponds, as opposed to having 2, one on both properties. They're basically planned for approximately the same location. We would marry them up. In doing so, it would allow for more accessible green space, as in difference to what is presently suggested here. Finally, this is just to speak to the overall form, architectural style, and feel of the proposed buildings. At first, the stacked townhouses standing 2.5 stories tall, more respectful to the streetscape and the R2S zone, primarily single attached duplexes, single to 2-story structures. In concept, kind of a temporary feel and a gable form. The thought is that the materiality would be of a warm, earthy tone, combination of wood, metal, masonry, possibly real or faux, depending on durability, longevity, and of course, building code. Another thing to pick up on this, which was fully intended, it was we tried to hold the overall average ridge line, so not to disrupt the streetscape and or the horizon line with a taller building mixed in between. We go from 2.5 stories to 3 stories with these smaller apartment buildings to a 4, 5, and 6-story building on the western end with those multi-units. We're able to accomplish this because there's a 12-meter drop from Mount Edward Road down to the Confederation Trail. Suggestion for the apartment buildings, again, 3 stories. The possibility of getting a little more contemporary and modern as we approach the royalty crossing. So a combination of gables or hipped roofs and flat extensions, saddlebags, and the potential incorporation of natural wood, metal, and masonry. There's a thought there would be a common thread between the architectural forms from building to building, but of course we want some individuality from one to the next. And then finally, the multi-unit flat roof structure, possible cranks in different corners to add some dynamic nature to it, make it visually appealing, and the possibility of mounting PV photovoltaics oriented to the south. The idea of going from a 4 to 5 to 6 was deliberate. Again, kind of a stepping nature from the Spencer Drive extension to what is presently planned as 4 6-story buildings on Bilco's development to the north. And that is our presentation thus far. Any questions? I'm done, yeah.
I think we might have a question here from Councillor Ramsey.
As far as it goes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Just one question. Are all units going to be rental units or the ones close to the Mount Edward Road for sale for homes and that?
No,
Just wondered if everything's going to be all rental. Thank you.
Everything is intended as rentals. So
Thank
the townhouses are on a single parcel because they don't have the proper frontage to be sold in the future. So it's all rentals.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Councillor Twill? Do you have a question?
Yeah. Thank you for your presentation, Robert.
of course.
The green space that you've illustrated in your conceptual design, has there been any discussions and collaboration with the Parks and Recreation Department regarding what you're presenting and how you're,
So there has been a lot of back and forth with the Parks Department in terms of the overall size. It's approximately 11% of the total parcel. They had asked us to increase the space abutting, Spencer Road extension for access. They had also requested that the storm retention pond be pushed to the northwest. In terms of the detail and the design of that park, that is with the Parks Department.
Right.
We've just allocated the green space and made sure that it connected with the development proposed to the north.
so is the green space like in terms of a square or the
It's-
way you've got it?
You
Is
can
it,
kind of see here, it's an irregular shape. That is almost a full acre of green space for parks, public green space.
okay.
this.
And then you mentioned the 2 lanes expanding to 4 lanes for Spencer Drive,
Yes,
which I believe will funnel into Ash Drive. Is that correct?
that's
that-
correct, yeah.
That's so 4 lanes, 2 lanes expanded to 4 lanes. Scott Adams is here. So what are the plans for Ash Drive? I mean, that's a lot of traffic. To go from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, you're inviting all that traffic, which some people would consider a community street. That's my first question on that proposed infrastructure expansion.
Councillor Twill, I believe the chief engineer discussed this at our Public Works Committee. Correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor McCabe, but the Ash Drive to access Ash Drive off Spencer Drive will not be a throughway. Either you're right out of Spencer or you're left out.
Right.
You can't drive through.
Okay,
So,
but I'm interested
Yeah.
in the proposed expansion of Spencer Drive from 2 lanes to 4 lanes.
Right.
So
that will not affect Ash Drive.
Okay,
Okay.
great. I'd like to ask the engineer.
Yep, she's
So,
right there.
so what is the rationale to expand it from 2 lanes to 4 lanes? What's the rationale?
Are you asking Mr. Hagas or are you asking the chief engineer?
Either one.
So I'll let Scott come up, but
Yeah, that's-
the developer, it had given this to the city because it was a request.
Right.
It actually impeded on the total plan. But Scott will have to speak to the intentions for that 4-lane.
Robert, just
Yes.
before the chief engineer takes over, of the phase, the site, so the site is 7.95 acres, right? And it's in 2 phases?
That's correct.
So it's, and you're allowing for an acre for green space.
That's
But-
correct.
So that's a little more than required because it's either
Correct.
10% or cash in lieu of the 10%.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Adams, did you want to address Councillor Dweil's 2-lane to 4-lane question?
Thank you, Your Worship. So yes, as everyone's aware at the table up here, we did a West Royalty Commercial Area Traffic Plan. Part of that plan was looking at current traffic volumes in the area and projected future volumes of traffic that would be using not only Spencer Drive, but also all the surrounding streets, including University Avenue, Capitol Drive, and Mount Everett Road. Part of that was looking at a 10 and 20-year phase out from today. Looking at those projections, the volume traffic on Spencer, same with Capitol Drive that leads into Spencer, would be such that we would have to expand to 4 lanes. Does not impact how we're intersecting at Mount Everett Road in terms of Ash Drive. Ash Drive will still be restricted access to Ash Drive. So for folks that are trying to come out of Ash Drive, they can go any direction, left, right, or straight once the intersection is built. But if you're trying to access Ash Drive from Mount Everett Road, the only way you can access it is if you're heading northbound on Mount Everett Road. So it's a right-in only to Ash Drive. And it's solely, and that's for emergency purposes and maintenance, of course. So that's the rationale in the widening, just because of the pure growth over the next 10, 20 years for the area. So that's what we're currently looking at for the design purpose exercise that we're doing right now. For the construction of this, hopefully starting later this year.
Okay, Councillor Twill, another question?
Yeah. Scott, one of the things I learned with the construction of the pathway in Towers Road is that 90% of that traffic that uses Towers Road is a vehicle trafficker using that from a shortcut. They're not actually going to the malls, right? So has there been any consideration given into creating or embarking upon a public relations educational awareness campaign to let the traveling public or encourage the traveling public to using the bypass as opposed to using, the Tower Roads and the expansion to Spencer Drive. I mean, that's why the bypass was built. I mean, millions and millions of dollars were spent on the bypass, and yet we're having a lot of traffic using these community streets or proposed community streets for shortcuts. So I bring that up to see what the possibilities are to encourage that traffic not to use these community streets and to use the bypass.
Good question. So drivers are going to act like water. If you got water flowing somewhere and you put a dam in front of it, what does the water do? It goes around it. That's what drivers do. Drivers' habits, everyone in this room does it. We always take the shortest way when we're in a hurry because that is just the way society is today. And it's challenging for engineers because, as you mentioned, especially on local roads, we're seeing an increase in traffic on local roads. One of the ways to improve that, though, is identifying your major roads in the streets, so your major roadways, your major minor collectors, like we typically like to call them. Spencer Drive is one of them. Those are the roads you want to encourage drivers to do that. So how do you encourage drivers to take these routes? Is make them more appealing, and you make them more appealing by making it the easiest way to get from point A to point B. That is truly the way to get the traffic out of the residential streets. Of course, there's other tool. You have to use a number of metrics or a number of tools in the residential streets to kind of push people along. But again, the best way to improve traffic and get it out of the residential streets is to improve our network of minor and major collector roads. If you drive out there today on University Avenue at 4 p.m., we're backed up, sometimes down, sometimes past UPEI from the mall. And the reason is, it's just, we have a lot of traffic that's coming and going in through this major entry into the city. So this study that CBCL did for the city identified that. We knew it was there. They identified it. They were able to quantify it and predict or identify a road network that's going to be able to handle that traffic flow today and for the next 10, 15 years is what the hope is as part of that study, or it was the hope as a result of that study. So that's what we're trying to do here. We are trying to do kind of two things at once here. We're trying to open this area, help these developers get their development going, but we also want to make sure we restrict the number of access points to our major roads. We want to be able to control that flow so that we can better handle those flows of traffic on our major collectors and minor collectors to get everyone from point A to point B while avoiding going through residential streets.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Adams. Can we just open the mic up, and if there's any councilors that wish to ask further questions, just hold them, please. So the mic is open, and I would ask if you just give your name, where you live, doesn't have to be address, it can be Charlottetown, and maybe Stratford or Cornwall, but hopefully Charlottetown. And we're allowing just 3 to 5 minutes. So the timer's there, and
Great. Okay.
Andrew, just put down, can you pull
Yeah,
down the
I
mic?
can make it shorter. I always seem to be the first one that
That's all right.
pops up. Get it rolling. That's fine. Andrea Battison, resident of Charlottetown. Thank you for the presentation, and I'll speak for some people hiding in the background that if the traffic isn't going to the mall and it's just going through the mall parking lot, maybe Towers Road and the Spencer, whatever, could be a cul-de-sac and just serve the neighborhood, or else maybe we're going to need traffic lights in the shopping mall parking lot. Anyway, back to what we're here for tonight. Thanks for your presentation. It's Robert, right? Thank you. And it was really great to see that you took some of the points that were brought up at the last meeting and integrating the green space. Because really, what I'm seeing when I'm looking at this, it's new housing, and this is a huge tract of land that the city has got a comprehensive development area, and we're putting it to new housing. And what I see happening is that we're creating a brand new neighborhood. This is a new neighborhood, and it would be awesome to see people bringing concepts for the 21st century into this neighborhood, making it livable, walkable, interactive. All these people that are going to be living here should be proud of that neighborhood. They should have shops at ground level, amenities, so that the kids don't have to cross these potentially 4-lane streets to get to a shopping mall. Interactive or active ground level shops, amenities. I believe that was proposed by the last one. And that creates a real community here. And then you'd be proud to live there, right? And I think it would be awesome if the developer could consider trying to get something like that so the people have place to go, so that whole area is animated all the time. Not just in the morning when everyone's racing out trying to get to work. That should be a place to live and grow and play and recreate and meet your neighbors and know your neighbors. All right, I think that's very important, and I really wish some of these concepts would take that into consideration. And what I'm kind of seeing, like, we've got, what, 4 or 5 developments in this area, and every time we see them, they're isolated. You've taken the effort to at least sketch in one of these drawings how it connects with the next one. And I guess I'm glad to see the increased green space. Same question to the last developer was, have you considered getting a variance on the minimum parking requirement? Because you don't need variances because it's a CDA. And let's build for the 21st century with public transportation, include bus stops, like really make this a community space and make it a shining example in the city. I think that would be awesome. And the question I have for the developer, your designer as an architect, there was a road plan designed, and everything I'm seeing, you know, from my perspective is that all your designers you've come across and you've built around a road design that moves vehicles rather than people. And it's not even there yet, it's on paper. So if you, as a designer and architect, creating community, urban planner, we're trying to create a neighborhood here and a community, would you change the way you've laid out your buildings? Open question.
Your first suggestion on parking, variance for parking, it was a great one. You made it last month as well. But you can't get a variance on parking, unfortunately. So with
No,
regard,
I think you can. We've done that downtown. There's a development on Connaught Square, which gets parking allocation and had to buy parking in a parkade because they don't have parking on site. You have a giant parking mall, shopping mall, asphalt desert that could be parking. So unless the city wants to correct me.
We're going to note that, and Donna is here, who is our manager of policy and heritage, so she will look into that.
Now, because you do that.
No, I know the property you're talking about down in Connaught Square.
And I think it's possible, and I would really ask you to push for that.
We'll take note of that, Robert.
Yeah.
She had some other questions. too.
sorry, yeah, I know, and unfortunately, like we did work with the adjacent developer with their concepts, but they preceded us. In fact, so much so that we had an initial concept that was quite different than this, and it was modified to accommodate that north-south road connector. At that point, the ship had sailed on their development, but there's been lots of talk about transit bus stops along this north-south road connector, bike trails, sidewalks, and Rob spoke to it before. Whatever happens within their development would be the same for ours. That, of course, would be in consultation with Public Works, because it will be a public road. And the green space, I mean, yes, it's technical, it's not centralized, but it does touch on those public roads. With our development, we tried to break it up as much as possible to allow for views to those public green spaces, and also provide a different number of offerings, from a garden suite to a townhouse to a small apartment and a larger apartment. With Bilco's concept, it's 4 6-story buildings. There's a few townhouses along the way. They've created this plaza-like concept with commercial down below. That makes sense, but they essentially have 2 different offerings. So the developer wanted to break it up and have different types of housing options. Yeah, but between that, the road connector and the green space, that's really all we could do in terms of the total development.
Okay, I appreciate that you have restrictions. I
Yeah.
guess I haven't seen a shovel in the ground yet, and it's all pencil and paper.
Yeah.
And so I guess my question to you specifically was, as an architect, as an urban planner, experience, design, making communities.
Yeah.
Would a road, potentially 4 levels that goes through a parking, 4 lanes going through a park, and something that bisects all of these things right down, would that be the desired outcome? If you had a blank slate as the developers, and if you all got together and said, hey, we could build a neighborhood for the 21st century, which integrates all the new stuff that's out there, and say, let's just get together, let's move our buildings around, what could you come up with? And that road plan is designed to move vehicles. It's not there to move people. And it's not there to get people meeting each other. And I'm just wondering, would you have a different design concept if you weren't working to a road plan that came before the homes? Is chicken egg? I'm just curious, your opinion, if it could change, what you would do differently.
I mean, including St. Martha's Court, yes, it would be ideal to have the entire parcel, right, to design a concept. But that just wasn't the reality with this. St. Martha's Court is already well on its way. But beyond that, you still will require a road for vehicular access, for emergency vehicles, for servicing. In fact, we would prefer not to put in the road, well, the developer would, because it doesn't really assist their concept. It could be serviced by the extension. However, as a good neighbor and to allow for the rest of this property to be developed, that north-south road is needed, that road extension. So for example, just to point out, perhaps, yes, it could take on a different shape. There are plans, there was talks of it, Rob brought it up, speed bumps, things to slow it down for pedestrian walkways and things like that. But at the end of the day, to be able to develop, this portion of the property, we need that road for servicing and emergency vehicles.
Okay,
So-
I can understand there's a road that needs, I'm just wondering, would it have needed to be there if you had a blank canvas and you were putting in housing and creating community and integration and public pathways, bike space and recreational space? Would you have a road that bisected all these developments?
Andrea, I think our chief engineer can address that, because our chief engineer has to keep in mind that when a development is proposed through the planning department, we require, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Adams, two
means.
entrances and egresses
Yeah.
for emergency vehicles. And the case in point, Andrea, is Hammond Plains. When it went up in fire, they only had one way in.
I'm
So-
not arguing that you
No.
need an entry and exit. I'm just wondering about the location. You're making a throughway through a new neighborhood, perhaps.
Right.
It's a chicken egg.
Yeah.
You created a road design and you're forcing all the developers to build around a road that doesn't exist except on paper.
Mhm.
And some of these developers might have had other ideas and concepts. And tonight we're here, well, we had to put our road here because the other developer had to put their road there because that's what the map said. But there isn't a road there yet. And I'm just, are we missing an opportunity to do something really forward-thinking, impressive, something that the city would really be proud of,
Yeah.
as this is development in the 21st century for communities, for people, for moving people, for integrating, for creating healthy communities, happy communities.
Well,
That was the
our
question.
chief engineer, who's responsible for roads, streets and roads, will ensure that not only will it be a roadway, that north-south road will also have an active transportation pathway. And I hope the same will be true for the Spencer Drive. No good just building a road for cars. It has to be built for bicycles, walkers, persons in wheelchairs, moms and dads with baby carriages, skateboarders, rollerbladers, and so forth. So that will be, again, creating a walkable, a more integrated community for the 21st century. If Robert, is there anything that
No,
you could add?
I completely understand. You
I do
have
too.
The road dividing what could otherwise be one singular neighborhood, but I think it can be designed in a tasteful way from a civil perspective to dissolve that road, to make it more pedestrian friendly. I mean, this exists in major urban cores where you have neighborhoods dissected by roads. So I think how this road is treated and designed is very, very important to, touch on some of the points that you brought up.
All right. No, I was just curious
No,
if you didn't have a restriction for these roads, if the design would have been different and allowed for buildings to be, facing each other, creating
Yeah.
more green space, rotating them rather than walls.
Right.
And that's my time.
Andrea?
Someone else?
Again, thank you for your input. I do appreciate it. It was well listened to. It was adhered to in the last meeting, and I know that the Flores Development did listen, and they were at that last meeting and tried to incorporate some of those ideas into this plan. Are there any other persons that would like to step up and add some comments, questions? Just before you do, I know Councillor Tweel wanted to ask one. Is there any other councillors that want to ask questions? And Robert, transit stops will be on this north-south road? Is that what you're
Yes,
looking
that's
at?
what's been discussed, yeah.
Yeah. And just to our chief engineer, and I know the our fire inspectors here, Winston Bryan. So do we need that north-south road connected right to Martha's, is it Martha's Crescent?
St. Martha's Court.
Martha's Court. Does that have to be in place before Bilko goes ahead? It doesn't? But we will have a connection to Martha's, is it Martha's?
St. Martha's Court.
Yeah, Martha's Court. And that's a good question. Before we issue occupancy permits for any of these, the two developments, we will have that connection into Martha's Court, correct?
We'd have to, yeah.
Can you just confirm that, Robert? Is that
That's
yes?
correct. In order for phase two, for both developments to occur, that north-south road connector has to be in place.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Twill.
Um,
Go ahead.
But to clarify, that phase one, the development that is abutting Mount Edward Road can occur prior to that north-south road connector.
Thank you. I don't, this question would be for an engineer again. With all the development that we're seeing in this section of Mount Edward Road, as you know, I've been bringing up the issue of safe pathway on the west side of Mount Edward Road. I mean, there's a lot of development that's going to take place here in the next year or so, a tremendous amount of development. There's going to be more traffic. Mount Edward Road has experienced unprecedented traffic, whether it be industrial, whether it be institutional, residential, and it's simply not safe for the people that live on the west side of Mount Edward Road. And I've been promoting and lobbying the fact that we need an active transportation pathway on the west side for cyclists, for people that want to walk and commute up and down that stretch of Mount Edward Road. They can't even cross Mount Edward Road because there's no sidewalks, there's no pathway. You can't even put a crosswalk, and it's hard for students at the elementary level that want to cross Mount Edward Road to go to Sherwood Elementary School or to access some of the other venues and facilities and amenities on the other side of Sherwood. So I bring that up again because I think it's critical, I think it's imperative, and I think it's important that we make this part of Mount Edward Road livable and walkable, and we need those amenities. You can't have all this development and not have the infrastructure in place from a pedestrian perspective. So I bring that forward again.
Counselor, yes, I believe we talked about this at our last committee meeting as well. As we mentioned, capital budget season is coming up, and part of that, those discussions will be our updating our 5-year plans, which includes multi-use pathways and sidewalks. We've heard you, and we are aware of the concerns, and we know the traffic volumes are there. So it's not a matter, we understand the need for it, and it's been on our radar as well as yours.
Yeah.
So we do know that it is necessary some point in the very near future. It's just, again, priorities at council level, and those are the discussions that will take place in the coming months on what those priorities will be and how much money we allocate to those priorities over the next few years.
I thank you, Scott. I appreciate that. I guess I bring it up again because I believe, and so do the residents of the community, there's a sense of urgency with respect to that proposed infrastructure. Thank you.
Councilor McAleer.
Yes, I was just curious, projected timelines of the phases, like, years, like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, I realize it's a bit of crystal ball, and I'm sure.
Kind of is, and contingent on these roads being put in place. But there is a plan with phase 1 to start on those multi-unit buildings right away. So that could be a year off. With the townhouses just behind, I expect just the way the market is and the available labor force in the construction industry that, these multi-units will probably are 3, 4, maybe 5 years off, I would say, from today. And again, that's contingent on when Spencer Drive extension goes into place and, of course, the north-south road connector. The obvious benefit for this one versus build codes is once Spencer Drive extension gets complete, they could essentially start working on their second phase in larger multi-unit buildings. I hope that answers your question. That's my best guess.
Oh, it's good there,
Thank you.
Robert. Okay, Andrea, do you want to take a second crack at it? Andrea Battison, Charlottetown?
Thank you. No, thank you for all your
Thank you.
patience. I appreciate it.
No.
I think it's just a great, these meetings are just
Yep.
such a good opportunity to try and just see what's happening and what people are thinking. When you were going through the slides, I was curious, the apartment buildings, how many stories are they?
So there is a 4-story here,
Okay,
5 here, 6.
okay.
And these are proposed as 4 6-story buildings.
Okay, something I noticed in the development on the north, I forget the name. They have some step backs after about 3 or 4 stories, just
Yeah.
to help pedestrianize
Yeah.
the scale.
After their 4-story, yes.
Yeah, I couldn't tell when you were going through
So
your
no,
drawings. Are you doing that?
No, with the 4 and the 5, we just step the buildings rather than the floor levels. But I understand what you're saying, stepping back the 4th floor level up
Yeah.
to the 6th, but our first is 4,
Oh.
our second is 5. It's this one to the north that would be 6.
At 6, and is
Yeah.
that one step back at
It
all?
is not presently, no.
No, okay. No, that's
No,
fine.
and the concept made perfect sense, I think for Bilko's, because there's, again, 4 buildings, sorry, in parallel with each other. So to not do that step back, speaking as an architect within that plaza, would be very intimidating. So it makes perfect sense for that. We have a much different kind of arrangement with this cloister space, if you will, and trying to bring the buildings around that green space in our proposed development. So the step back make perfect sense for that development.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then the last question, just, and it might not work, is the buildings, your buildings are making like a little courtyard around a parking lot,
Yes.
right? And then they've got a skinny band of green space to the north, we'll call it. If buildings were rotated at all, does that help, like, make more green space? Because these are all centered around a parking lot.
Well, yeah, I know, and it would be great to, we retreated the parking lot with putting more underground in place. Of
Mhm.
course, if that 1-to-1 ratio had changed, the intent and hope was that whole thing would be green. That would
Right.
certainly help.
How many spaces are on that surface lot?
For this one here?
Yeah.
30,
30.
30.
Okay.
With again, 80% of it is underground.
Right, so 80%, so if you could go from you're working on a 1-to-1
1-to-1, just over 1-to-1, yeah.
rather than 0.75.
That would,
let's use
that would make that disappear.
That would make that disappear. That's amazing. So if you could get a variance on the minimum parking requirement, even down to 0.75, you're telling me that that surface parking lot, which is forming the courtyard for your buildings, would turn into a green space?
Again, if
If it was built
80%
underground? if
80%
you could-
underground, then yes.
So I would really ask council, if the developer comes forward with a request to get a variance on the minimum parking requirement, that you really consider what you could be giving the residents of that area. It would be an amazing space. It's protected. It's got the Confederation Trail. There's another big building blocking access to the north-south through road, narrow access for parking. That becomes an amazing, safe green space for play, for garden. You could put a community garden in there. You could do so much more than have asphalt. And given that the city and the planning department approves developments with lists of major variances, moving buildings closer, moving buildings higher, eliminating the need, requirements for step backs, setbacks, hiding parking. If you put a bus route through there and built a bus shelter, which would take about, let's make it a really nice bus shelter, about 3 parking spaces on the road, just imagine what you'd be giving back to the people that are living there by giving them a variance on the minimum parking requirement. Thank you.
That will be looked into by our manager, Donna Miller-Hayton, Manager of Policy and Heritage. And we appreciate your input. I know that Robert has listened to a lot of what you were saying, and again, Jen is down there with Robert from Flores, so those points are being considered. Just one question on the green space. So it's gonna, as you said, it'll work in with Bilko's green space, so there'll be all that green space. Great. That
Yeah.
looks,
And again, the intent is to bring the retention ponds together.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's great. And hopefully that any asphalt that you have to look at, can you look at permeable surfaces that allows water to be part of that absorbing of
Sure.
moisture?
Yeah,
It's
certainly could be
always.
considered, yeah.
Okay. Councillor Duran has his hand up. We can't see him. So Councillor Duran, do you have a question?
Yes, I do, Mayor Brown. Thank you. And thank you, Robert, for your presentation. I'm just looking at the Spencer Drive extension and the north-south connector. It goes through various developments. And I'm curious, who pays for these roads? I don't know if our engineer can answer that question. These are major extensions to the roads and are very expensive. So I'm just wondering who pays for all these and develops those roads?
Robert, could we allow the chief engineer to answer that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, he can also answer about Spencer Drive. I think that'll be our road. Chief Engineer Scott Adams,
Good
Councillor
evening,
Duran.
Councillor Duran. So in regards to your question, so the north-south road would be built and paid for by each developer. The Spencer Drive extension, this is a road necessary for the city, just in general, in terms of handling the traffic volumes in the area. So it is a big part of the city better managing our traffic flow in this area of the city. So the city will have to take the brunt of the cost, which has been discussed at the budget season last season. And then we have some money already budgeted for this year to start some earthwork later this year, early winter, and finish it up sometime this time next year.
Thank you. Just to follow up, Mayor Brown.
Go ahead, Councillor Duran.
Well, I understand, like, when there's new developments put in place, it's all up on the developers, and that's part of their plan and the cost recovery when they're building buildings to get it back. Why did we decide that we needed this major road and the residents would have to pay for that? Why isn't it shared with development? I just don't understand that. This is the first time that I can, remember that we're paying for the whole road. I just don't understand it. How did that happen?
Mr. Adams.
Certainly. So this road's a little more complicated than just the two developers that have been discussed today with Buildco and the Flourish Group. Again, once this road opens, right now we have our consultant, I guess, going and looking and trying to come up with a figure, trying to figure out what percentage of traffic would have, if there was no development here, what that percentage of traffic would be on Spencer Drive, which we feel is going to be quite high, regardless if this development was there or not. And then we're going to put in the anticipated traffic volumes from this development and see what the division or what that percentages of those roads were. So in the past, the city has done that, and that has been one of the options that we're looking at when we go to finalize the costs for this road. To look with the developers. So anyway, that's really the thing with Spencer. It's going to be a high percentage of existing traffic or future projected traffic that is coming from existing streets, not truly coming from these two developments.
Okay, just one quick follow-up there, Scott. Do we do anywhere else in the city? Do we do this anywhere else that I could tell someone, yes, we just didn't do it, Spencer, we did it here or there? Any other spots?
We're currently doing the Water Street extension over in Eastern Gateway. We're building that road at city dollars. There's no development or no funding. We have some federal funding for that road just because of the stormwater portion, but that is a city road, a brand new road being built.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'd just like to remind you that if you do wish to submit any comments, please send them in by tomorrow noon and just email to planning@charlottetown.ca. So, and I know, Laurel, If there are some late, Emily, maybe on Friday you will accept them. I'm sure you will. You're such kind people. Okay. Do you want, Councilor McCabe, you're all right? You want to? Okay. Good. Okay, so I have to go back to the agenda, and back to the agenda is introduction of new business. None. Motion to adjourn, Councilor McCabe, and Councilor Ramsey, all in favor, put up your hand. Thank you very much.